The air conditioning hums, a luxury we couldn't afford before, chilling the room despite the bodies packed inside. Laughter rings out, glass clinks. Champagne bubbles like tiny victories exploding. Across the room, he raises his glass, catching my eye. A smile stretches across his face, wide and triumphant. It's over. We won. $2 million. Everything we fought for, everything we sacrificed. My stomach churns, not from the expensive canapés, but from a knot of exhaustion and something else, something I can't name, in the celebratory din. He starts walking towards me, pushing through the crowd of lawyers, advisors, investors, people who were strangers just months ago but are now part of this shared success. His eyes are bright, sharp. The eyes of a man who just conquered his world. He reaches me, takes my hand. His grip is firm, almost possessive. He leans in, and I expect words of thanks, of shared triumph, a recognition of the endless nights I spent buried in documents, the strategic angles I found, the emotional rock I was when he was crumbling. But his voice is low, careful, cutting through the noise like ice. It's not words of love or partnership. It's a severance. And the knot in my stomach tightens into a fist. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Our life together started simply. 2 kids with big ideas and very little money. He had the vision, the technical skill to build a business from the ground up. I had the organizational mind, the relentless work ethic, the ability to see problems before they happened and find solutions nobody else considered. We were a team. He built the engine, I built the tracks. His startup wasn't glamorous at first. Long hours in a cramped office that smelled of cheap coffee and burning ambition. My salary back then was mostly theoretical. We poured everything back into the business, living on instant noodles and the fierce belief that we were building something real. My role evolved organically. I started doing the books, managing schedules, handling logistics. But quickly, I became more than an administrator. I was his sounding board, his chief strategist for operations. I learned the technical jargon, understood the flow of his business better than some of the early employees. I anticipated his needs before he voiced them. When investors came sniffing, I was the one who organized the data rooms, who polished the presentations, who smoothed over the rough edges he, in his genius, sometimes created. I wasn't just his wife. I was his indispensable partner in building this empire. We talked business over dinner in bed during weekend hikes. His success was my success. His stress was my stress. It wasn't a 9-to-5. It was our life, intertwined, inseparable. I believed in him, in us, with every fiber of my being. My desire wasn't for personal glory, but for the shared dream to flourish, for the security and future we were building together. I wanted the stability, the chance to maybe, someday, have a family without the crushing weight of debt and uncertainty. I wanted the payoff for the years of relentless effort, the quiet sacrifices. Then the lawsuit hit. It wasn't a small claim. It was from a former partner, bitter and well-funded, alleging intellectual property theft, breach of contract, the works. Their demand wasn't just money. It was designed to cripple the company, to tear down everything he had built. The number they threw out felt astronomical, designed to terrify us into submission. It was a direct threat to our survival. Overnight, the atmosphere shifted. The hopeful hum of creation was replaced by the cold dread of potential destruction. Panic flared in his eyes first. I remember the moment he read the papers served to us. His face drained of color. He crumpled them in his fist, looking lost. That's when my own shift happened. My role changed from building to defending. I became the fortress walls. While he plunged into the technical details with the lawyers, explaining his code, his processes, I went into overdrive on the documentation side. I pulled up emails from years ago, tracked versions of software, correlated timelines, built a narrative of innovation that countered their claims of theft. I worked side by side with our legal team, but honestly, I often felt like their paralegal, digging through mountains of data, finding the needles in the haystack that could prove our case. The lead lawyer, a sharp woman named Eleanor Vance, relied on me constantly to make sense of the company's history, its internal records, the context behind cryptic emails. I knew where every digital file was buried, every key conversation logged. My memory for the business details was photographic. Sleep became a luxury we couldn't afford. We lived on coffee and the adrenaline of fear. Dinner conversations weren't about our day, but about legal strategy, potential outcomes, worst-case scenarios. He was volatile, swinging between grim determination and despair. I had to be the steady one, the calm center in the storm. I'd talk him through panic attacks, remind him of the truth of his work, feed him when he forgot to eat. I wasn't just managing the lawsuit data. I was managing him. My efforts weren't just professional. They were deeply personal. This wasn't just his company being attacked. It was our future, our life. The blurring of lines between work and marriage was complete. There was no off switch. Every moment was consumed by the fight. My value in my eyes and seemingly in his was inextricably linked to my ability to help us survive this. The lawsuit intensified. The opposing side was aggressive, filing motions, demanding endless discovery. Their strategy was to overwhelm us, bleed us dry with legal fees. Money became tighter than ever. We cut back on everything. The initial confidence we had in our defense began to waver under the relentless pressure. There were days when he would come home, look at me, and just shake his head, saying, "I don't know if we can win this," and I would have to find the strength for both of us. I remember one night, poring over old project management files, trying to find evidence of a specific feature's development timeline that contradicted their claims. Hours melted away. My eyes burned. I felt the weight of everything pressing down. And then I found it. A chain of emails, dated months before their alleged invention, detailing his concept, our discussions, the initial coding work. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was concrete proof, undeniable. I remember the surge of triumph, small but potent. I woke him up, shaking his shoulder. He squinted at the screen, his face groggy. As he read, his eyes widened. A spark of hope reignited. "You found it," he whispered. "You actually found it." In that moment, under the harsh glow of the laptop screen, we were partners again, united against a common enemy. It felt like a pivotal moment, a confirmation that my work, my dedication, was paying off, not just professionally, but for us. The trial was a grueling performance. Days bled into weeks inside the sterile courtroom. The air was thick with tension. Every piece of evidence, every word spoken felt amplified, scrutinized. I sat in the gallery, taking notes, passing them to Eleanor Vance's junior associate. I watched his testimony, willing him to be calm, to be clear. I saw the opposing lawyers try to twist his words, question his integrity. My stomach was in knots the entire time. During breaks, I'd meet him in the hallway, offering quiet encouragement, reminding him of key points, helping him breathe. He leaned on me heavily during this period. He'd whisper his fears to me, the crushing pressure, the doubt. He'd tell me he couldn't have gotten through the day without seeing me there, without my steady presence. He'd look at me with an intensity that spoke of shared struggle and mutual reliance. It was a terrible time, filled with anxiety, but it also felt like the ultimate test of our partnership, one we were passing side by side. This shared ordeal, this fight for our future, was forging an even deeper bond, I thought. We were in the trenches together. We would emerge victorious, together, stronger. Then came the waiting. The jury was out. Every minute felt like an hour. We stayed in a nearby hotel, unable to return home, unable to do anything but wait. The tension was unbearable. He paced, ran his hands through his hair. I tried to distract him, talk about anything else, but all roads led back to the potential verdict. Would we lose everything? The business, our home, our future? Or would we survive? When the call came, summoning us back to the courtroom, my heart hammered against my ribs. Walking back into that room felt like walking into a fate yet unknown. The air was heavy, silent, everyone waiting. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable. The judge spoke. The clerk read the verdict. and the world tilted. Not guilty on the IP theft. Not guilty on the breach. And then the counterclaim. Damages awarded to us. $2 million. A collective gasp went through the room from the opposing side. Our side erupted. A wave of relief, pure, unadulterated, washed over me so powerfully my knees almost buckled. He let out a yell, a sound of pure, raw victory. He turned, found me in the gallery, and his eyes were wet. He mouthed, "We did it later." There were handshakes, backslaps, words of congratulations. Eleanor Vance found me, her face beaming. "You are invaluable," she said sincerely. "Honestly, the information you dug up, the way you organized it, it made all the difference." I felt a surge of pride, a validation. My contribution was acknowledged, vital. The party that followed was a blur of release and celebration. The knot in my stomach from fear had unraveled into pure, dizzying relief. This was it, the end of the struggle, the beginning of something new, built on a stronger foundation. That's where we were when he walked towards me, glass in hand, smile on his face. The smile didn't reach his eyes. They were cold, calculating. The grip on my hand wasn't affectionate, it was dismissive. He pulled me slightly away from the nearest clusters of people, just enough for privacy, not enough to seem strange. He still held my hand, but it felt like holding a stranger's. The noise of the party faded, muffled by a sudden, sharp focus on his face, his words. "This is it," he said, his voice still low, but with a new, hard edge I'd never heard directed at me before. "We did it." "We did," I agreed, feeling a smile bloom on my face, ready to share the moment. "Right," he nodded, but the nod wasn't agreement, it was punctuation. "And now, things change." My smile faltered. "Change? What do you mean?" He squeezed my hand a little too tightly. "The business is entering a new phase. We're funded now. We have capital. We need to be professional." My brow furrowed. Professional? I'd just spent the last 2 years being professional to an extent I didn't know I was capable of. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice quiet now, a tremor starting to run through me. He looked past me, towards the investors. "Your role, it's not really needed anymore. The administrative stuff, the helping out, will hire an office manager, proper HR. People with formal qualifications." The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. Helping out. My relentless work, my strategic input, my intimate knowledge of every facet of the company, my role in winning the lawsuit, reduced to helping out. And the implication? I didn't have formal qualifications, never mind that I'd been doing the job of 3 people, a job that required a deeper understanding of his business than any generic qualification could provide. "You're firing me?" I whispered, the concept so alien, so impossible. It didn't feel real. He finally looked back at my face. There was no apology, no sadness. Just a detached, almost clinical expression. "It's not personal. It's business. The company needs to scale. We need structure. You understand." I didn't understand. Not at all. This wasn't just business. This was our life, our partnership, our shared victory. He was using the success I helped secure to discard me. "After everything?" My voice cracked. "After the lawsuit? After what I did?" He sighed, an impatient sound. "Yes, you helped. And I appreciate it. But that was crisis management. This is growth. Different skill sets are required." He released my hand. It felt suddenly, terribly empty. He took a step back, his eyes already scanning the room, ready to rejoin the celebration, the new future he'd just brutally informed me I wasn't part of. "Consider this your severance," he said, gesturing vaguely around the expensive room, the champagne, the people. "You'll get a good settlement in the divorce. More than fair, considering." "Divorce." He said it so casually, as if it were just another item on a business agenda. The word hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just about being fired. It was about being erased. My role in his life, in his business, in our future, terminated with extreme prejudice, immediately following the moment of our greatest shared triumph. The $2 million, the victory we fought for side by side, became the instrument of my expulsion. The knot in my stomach was no longer fear or anxiety. It was the hard, cold weight of absolute betrayal. The immediate aftermath was a blur of shock and humiliation. I didn't cause a scene at the party. The survival instinct kicked in. I nodded, numbly, mumbled something I don't even remember, and somehow extracted myself from the room, from the building, from that life. The city lights outside seemed too bright, too loud. I felt exposed, raw. Driving home was automatic. I don't recall the journey. I just remember walking into our house for now, and the silence hitting me. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, of collapsing from exhaustion and elation together. Instead, it was just silence, heavy with the weight of his words. The days that followed were a purgatory of disbelief. He acted as if nothing fundamental had changed, only that my work status had been updated. He was still living in the house, buzzing with plans for the business, talking about hiring teams, scaling up. He discussed it all openly, as if I were a roommate, not a wife he had just discarded professionally and personally in the same breath. He seemed genuinely oblivious to the depth of the wound he had inflicted. Or maybe he wasn't oblivious. Maybe he just didn't care. That thought was even more chilling. The divorce proceedings started quickly. He hired a shark. His settlement offer was indeed fair, by the standard of someone calculating minimal spousal support based on my lack of formal, external income at the time of the filing, ignoring the years I'd worked for free or minimal pay, ignoring my integral role in building the very value he was now protecting. He minimized my contributions constantly. He painted me as someone who had merely done secretarial tasks, conveniently forgetting the nights I spent digging for crucial evidence, the strategic insights I provided, the emotional labor of keeping him functional. My lawyer was good, but we were starting from a position of disadvantage. He had the capital, our capital, the lawsuit money, and he was weaponizing it. Emotionally, I was a wreck. The betrayal cut deeper than just losing a job or a marriage. It felt like my entire history was being rewritten, my values systematically erased by the one person who should have championed it. I'd poured my life into his success, into our success, only for him to use that very success as the reason to cast me aside. Every memory felt tainted. The long nights working side by side, the shared dreams, the sacrifices. Were they real? Or had he always seen me as temporary, a tool to be used and discarded when something shinier came along? The unfairness of it all was a burning constant. I felt powerless, financially vulnerable, my identity stripped down to discarded wife, and fired employee. My early attempts to adapt were just trying to survive the emotional onslaught, trying to figure out basic finances without access to the business accounts I used to manage effortlessly. I was drowning in the silence of the house, the absence of the shared purpose that had defined me for so long. As the divorce negotiations dragged on, his stance hardened. He saw my emotional distress, my financial precarity, as weakness. He pressed his advantage. His lawyer was relentless, pushing for a settlement that would leave me comfortable, perhaps, but without any real stake in the future I had helped build. He wanted a clean break, no loose ends, no lingering claims on his newfound fortune or the business that was about to soar. He was moving on, already hinting at new hires, new strategies that were clearly designed to exclude anything I had brought to the table. He was building his new empire on the foundation I helped lay, and he wanted to pretend I was never part of the construction crew. This systematic erasure, this active minimizing of my past, fueled a different kind of fire in me. The initial shock and hurt began to crystallize into something colder, harder. The turning point wasn't a sudden epiphany, but a slow, simmering realization that survival wasn't enough. Getting a fair settlement wasn't justice. Justice wasn't just about money. It was about recognition, about reclaiming my narrative, about proving my value in a way he could never dismiss. He had used his power, his position, the very success I helped create, to try and crush me. He thought money and legal leverage were the ultimate weapons. But I had something he didn't fully appreciate: intimate, granular knowledge of his business, knowledge gained during those years when I was just helping out. I started thinking differently. Not about the divorce settlement, but about the business itself. I knew its strengths, yes, but I also knew its hidden weaknesses, its dependencies, its key relationships that were more fragile than they appeared. I knew where the blind spots were, because I had been the one watching them for years. I remembered conversations, casual remarks, concerns he'd brushed off, but that I'd noted. I remembered the names of early investors who had believed in the team, not just him. I remembered strategic decisions that seemed minor at the time, but had long-term implications he might not fully grasp now that he was surrounded by new, external advisors. And I remembered my father. My father wasn't in tech, but he was a shrewd businessman, built his own company from nothing, understood leverage, strategy, and the cold mechanics of acquisition. I had been hesitant to involve my family in the ugly mess of my divorce, but this wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about something bigger. It was about the fundamental injustice of his actions, the principle of it. I called my father. I laid it all out, the years of work, the lawsuit, my role, the firing, the condescending dismissal, the weaponized divorce proceedings. I explained his business, its structure, its recent win, its vulnerabilities as I saw them. My father listened quietly, asking sharp, incisive questions. When I finished, there was a long pause. He didn't just fire you, he said finally. He invalidated you. He thinks your contribution was cheap labor, easily replaced. He thinks money is the only power. He does, I confirmed, a bitter taste in my mouth. And you want to show him he's wrong, he stated, not a question. I want to show him. I agreed, the cold resolve settling deep in my bones. I want to show him that the things he dismissed as unimportant were the very things that held it all together. I want to show him that my knowledge, my work, wasn't just helping out, it was essential. And I want to show him the cost of forgetting that. My father was silent for another moment. He thinks he's untouchable now, he mused. With $2 million in the bank, riding high? He does, I said. He sees me as a problem to be settled and removed. We can make him see you differently, my father said. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. We can make him understand the true value of what he threw away. The seed of the plan, born from anger and injustice, began to sprout, nurtured by cold calculation and my father's experience. The strategy was simple, but required absolute secrecy and precision. We wouldn't fight him on the divorce terms directly, at least not primarily. We would fight him where he was strongest and turn his strength into his greatest vulnerability, the business itself. He was riding high, focusing on expansion, new hires, projecting an image of unstoppable growth. He was likely talking to potential investors, maybe even planning an IPO down the line. He felt secure, insulated by his legal victory and his capital. He didn't see me as a threat, only an inconvenience to be managed through lawyers. This was his blind spot. He underestimated me completely, still seeing the woman who managed the office, not the one who knew the skeletons buried in the digital closet, who understood the true dynamics of his company's ownership structure and its shareholder agreements better than his new CFO might. The plan was to acquire a controlling interest in the company. It sounded audacious, perhaps impossible, given his recent windfall and presumably strong position. But I knew things. I knew about early, smaller shareholders who might be looking to exit, perhaps feeling overlooked in the post-lawsuit glow. I knew about certain contractual obligations he had that could be leveraged. I knew the real value of the company, not just its projected value, because I had handled the books, understood the underlying assets and liabilities on a granular level. My father had the network and the capital to act quietly through shell companies and intermediaries, obscuring the final beneficial owner. My role was to provide the intelligence, identifying potential sellers, advising on the true value of their shares, highlighting any contractual weaknesses we could exploit in the process, explaining the complex cap table as it had evolved over the years. The process was painstaking and nerve-wracking. While the divorce proceedings continued, a separate, silent campaign was underway. Every interaction with him, every email from his lawyer, was a performance. I had to appear wounded, struggling, focused only on getting a fair settlement. I couldn't let him suspect for a second that I was operating on an entirely different chessboard. I used the divorce discovery process not just for the settlement, but to confirm details about the business's current financials, its shareholder registry, any recent changes. He unwittingly provided me with the very information I needed to execute my plan against him. He thought he was burying me. Instead, he was handing me the shovel to dig his grave. The tension was immense. There were moments I felt the strain would break me, balancing the public persona of a discarded wife with the secret identity of a quiet predator. But the cold anger, the deep-seated need for vindication, kept me going. He had tried to erase my past. I would control his future. He had underestimated my contribution. I would make him understand its true weight by taking away the very thing it saved. The deepening crisis wasn't my own this time, but the invisible pressure building around him, unknown to him. Each small percentage of shares acquired was a tightening of the net. Each piece of information confirmed was another brick in the wall I was building around his empire. He was oblivious, expanding his business, secure in his control. The more arrogant he seemed in the divorce negotiations, the more confident I became in the righteousness of my course. He saw the $2 million as his personal spoils. I saw it as a resource we had won together, now being used to fight me. The irony wasn't lost on me. It only sharpened my resolve. The plan culminated weeks later, coinciding with a pre-scheduled board meeting. My father, as the new majority shareholder, had the right to call the meeting, but we let the existing schedule stand. The agenda was routine: quarterly performance, future plans, expansion strategies, all the things he was so eager to discuss as the undisputed captain of a ship. He was confident, prepared to present his vision, solidify his control over the direction of the company. He had successfully navigated the lawsuit, shed the dead weight, me, and was ready to launch into a new era of profitability. He was at his peak, feeling invincible. This was the moment we chose to act. I wasn't at the meeting. My father attended, along with a small, quiet team from his company. The participants were his current board members, key executives he'd hired, and the remaining minority shareholders. He was chairing the meeting, running through his presentation, full of his usual energy and confidence. The atmosphere, I learned later, was positive, forward-looking. They were discussing leveraging the lawsuit windfall, expanding market share, hiring aggressively. He was in his element. Then, during the segment for shareholder updates, my father spoke. He introduced himself, politely, calmly. He stated that he represented a group of entities that had recently acquired significant shares in the company. There was a ripple of surprise in the room, but nothing alarming yet. Acquisitions happen. Then he stated the total percentage his entities now controlled. It was just over 50%, a clear, undeniable majority. The room went silent. Every eye turned to my husband. His confident smile wavered, then vanished. He stared at my father, then at the documents that were being quietly passed around, confirming the transfers, the percentages, the dates. The color drained from his face, just like the day he was served with the lawsuit papers. But this wasn't a threat from an external enemy. This was a takeover from within, silent, invisible until this very second. He looked at the names of the entities listed as the acquirers, then back at my father's face. He was trying to connect the dots. My father didn't need to say my name. The realization dawned on him, brutal and absolute. My father, a man he knew vaguely as my wife's dad, had just taken control of the company he had built, the company he had used the lawsuit winnings to protect and planned to leverage for his next phase of growth, the company he had fired me from just weeks earlier because he didn't need me anymore. He stammered something, questions about how, when, why. My father's response was simple, factual. Shares were acquired legally, voluntarily, from various shareholders who were willing to sell. The transactions were complete. Control had shifted. He offered reassurances about the company's future, its continued success, and stated his intention to appoint a new board, a new management structure. My husband didn't hear the rest. His eyes were wide, fixed on some point beyond the room. The sheer scale of his miscalculation, the perfect, quiet execution of the plan, The fact that the woman he had dismissed as mere help was the architect of his downfall, the one who had provided the intelligence and the motive, it was too much. The man who had just minutes ago radiated supreme confidence, the conqueror celebrating his hard-won empire, suddenly looked small, shattered. He gasped, a rattling sound, and clutched his chest. He swayed on his feet, then collapsed onto the conference table, sending papers scattering. The plot twist wasn't just that I got revenge. It was that he was completely blindsided. He never saw it coming because he never saw me. He thought my knowledge was limited to fetching coffee and sorting files. He thought my value was easily quantifiable and dismissible. He thought cutting me out meant severing all ties, removing any potential threat. He was so focused on the external enemies, the market competition, the legal challenges, that he forgot the person who had been at his side, internal to everything, seeing all the angles, knowing all the secrets. He underestimated my intelligence, my resilience, and crucially, my network and resources outside of him. He won the lawsuit, secured the $2 million, felt powerful and free, and in that moment of perceived ultimate victory, he made himself the most vulnerable. By discarding me, he activated the very forces that led to his complete loss of control. He didn't just lose the company. He lost it to the woman he considered disposable, facilitated by the family he likely dismissed as irrelevant to his big business world. He thought he was winning bigger by getting rid of me. Instead, my win was the entire game. The aftermath wasn't a feeling of wild celebration or triumphant revenge. It was quieter, colder. A profound sense of finality settled over me. The anger was still there, but it was banked, like embers after a fierce fire. I hadn't just gotten even. I had fundamentally altered the landscape. The company was now effectively under my father's control, advised heavily by me. My husband was removed from any executive position, though my father, ever the pragmatist, ensured he received a settlement commensurate with his founder status, just without any power or influence over the day-to-day operations or strategic direction. He was paid for his past work, but barred from controlling its future. The divorce concluded swiftly after that. His legal team, seeing the shift in power and my newfound leverage, became much more amenable. The settlement was fair, truly fair this time, reflecting my years of unpaid work and integral contribution to building the value of the company. But the money felt secondary. The real victory was the reclaiming of my narrative, the undeniable proof that I was not just help, not disposable, but a force to be reckoned with, a crucial element without which his empire faltered. There was no grand confrontation between us after that day. He was reportedly devastated, humbled in the most brutal way. I heard he was trying to start something new, but the fire was gone. The man who had walked towards me with such cold confidence at that party was broken, not just by the loss of his company, but by the shattering realization that his greatest strength had been turned against him by the person he least expected. For me, the feeling is complex. There's a cold satisfaction, yes. A sense of justice delivered. But there's also a lingering sadness for the partnership we had, the future I believed in, the man I thought I knew. That man was a mirage, replaced by someone capable of chilling cruelty and staggering short-sightedness. I learned a painful lesson about trust, about the true nature of ambition, and about the quiet power of being underestimated. I wasn't just the wife who got fired. I was the architect of a new beginning, for the company and for myself. The $2 million felt like a curse when it was used to discard me. Now, the value of the company, secured through my efforts and strategy, feels like vindication. It's a bittersweet kind of freedom, bought at a high emotional cost. I stand now, looking forward, not back, carrying the weight of what happened, but also the strength forged in the fire of betrayal. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version in the comments. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.